Good evening, good people of the snow. This is Ben from the Sawtooth Avalanche Center with your holiday weekend update issued on December 23rd, 2022. As a friendly reminder, this is not intended to replace our daily forecast. This is meant to catch you up on what's been going on in the past few days and give you a sense for what you may be encountering in the mountains this week. For the full forecast, check the forecast in the morning. Ethan's getting up at 3 a.m. tomorrow, writing a personalized weather forecast for you, an avalanche forecast, and I'll be doing the same at 3 a.m. on Christmas morning. So check those for the latest details. It has been a dangerous week in our neck of the woods. Here we are looking at the danger for the last 7 days, and you can see that all we've been at is considerable. At considerable danger, human-triggered avalanches are likely. This is not a great thing to be at, but this is just the state of our world right now. Let's talk a little bit about why we're there and how we got there. We had a storm that started on the solstice, or that ramped up on the solstice. Started on the 19th to the 20th, and we've already had 4 to 10 inches of snow in our southern areas and 8 to 12 inches of snow in our northern and western mountains. Coupled with that snow was a very, very healthy dose of wind. In this photo here from the White Clouds, you can see some old wind dunes that have been completely eroded by the serious wind event that we had. At our Soldier Mountains, we had multiple hours of 100+ mile-an-hour gusts, and many locations recorded strong to extreme winds throughout much of the day on Wednesday. The result was notable. Here we are looking at some big avalanches that happened in the Soldier Mountains, hard slabs there on the right, and looking on the left there, you can see a pretty wide, almost quarter-mile crown of an avalanche that occurred in middle to lower elevation terrain. We saw similar activity in the mountains here around the Wood River Valley, including this remotely triggered hard slab that a skier triggered in Quigley Canyon on the solstice. This is an east aspect about 5,500 feet. In addition to these relatively smaller slides, we observed some pretty darn large slides that happened during this wind event. Here we are in the Boulder Mountains looking at the Eagle Creek headwall. This is a southeast aspect, about 10,000 feet. And you can see several very large avalanches that failed. You can see a pretty obvious pattern of wind blowing roughly from left to right across this photo. Moving up to the Sawtooth Mountains, we also saw some pretty large avalanches that occurred. This avalanche is above Farley Lake here, which is the drainage between Imogene and Parks Peak. This is an east-southeast aspect, about 9,500 feet. We'd categorize this as a D3 avalanche. It's 500+ feet wide and 3 to 6 feet deep. And traveling a bit further south in the Smoky Mountains here, this is north of Saviors and south of Bramagin Peaks, a northeast aspect at about 10,000 feet. This is also a D3 avalanche in size, about 600 feet wide and also about 3 to 6 feet deep. Those crown depths are estimates, but these photos are taken from some distance away, and you can see that these are quite large avalanches. Today is Friday. We had a bit more snow trickle into our area. As of right now, we've seen about a trace to 2 inches in the mountains here around the Soldier and Wood River Valleys, and also heading up towards Galena Summit and the mountains on the eastern portion of that forecast zone. In our Sawtooth Mountains and the Banner Summit zone, we've seen roughly 3 to 6 inches of snow thus far, and that seems like it'll be about the end of that snowfall. Looking forward a bit to the weather for the weekend. Here we are looking at the weather for Ketchum. May see some fog lingering in the morning, but it's going to be a pretty nice day otherwise. Expect to see mostly sunny skies, very slight chance of showers overnight on Saturday night, and then continued partly cloudy to partly sunny skies for your Christmas day. Sounds pretty darn nice to me. We'll also see that temperatures moderate significantly. Highs in the valleys are in the mid-30s to the low 40s, and in the mountains expect to see the mid-20s to the low 30s. This is quite a change of pace from what we just came out of when we saw mountain weather stations recording temperatures in the -20s and some anecdotal reports of temperatures in the -30s nearby. Of course, not to be outdone, Montana really took the cake on this one as far as our neighbors go, where we saw temperatures approaching 50 degrees below zero. That's without wind chill. Yikes. As far as avalanche problems that we're dealing with in the mountains right now, the primary problem that we're going to be talking about today tomorrow, and for the foreseeable future are these persistent slab avalanches that we're worried about in our forecast area. The most widespread layer of weak snow was deposited around Thanksgiving, or buried around Thanksgiving. It was deposited early in November, and it built over several weeks before being buried. This layer has produced hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of avalanches in our forecast area already, and is certain to produce many more. We also have some spottier weak layers a bit further up in the snowpack that have also produced many, many avalanches. Any avalanche you trigger on this layer of weak snow, or any avalanche that starts out smaller in the snowpack and steps down, is going to be quite large. It's going to be quite destructive. As far as the trend and the likelihood of these, you'll see this graphic from today that we have these avalanches listed as possible. We've talked about these as being likely for the last many days, and the likelihood of triggering one of these avalanches is gradually decreasing. However, the consequences of triggering one of these avalanches is not decreasing. That makes for a pretty darn frustrating situation to be in for backcountry travelers. Don't worry, I'm right there with you guys. How do we deal with problems like this? Well, if you want to completely avoid triggering one of these avalanches, your best bet, and your only 100% safe bet, is to be avoiding avalanche terrain. Of course, that's frustrating for many of us and not exactly what we want to be doing. I understand that's not exactly what I want to be doing. However, that's the only sure way to be avoiding these. Know that if you are heading into avalanche terrain, particularly steep avalanche terrain, big avalanche terrain that's connected to a lot of slopes around you, you are taking on the chance of triggering one of these slides. This layer is buried several feet beneath the snow surface now, and it's got a dense slab on top of it. It makes it harder to impact this weak layer. But we do know that if we start to collapse this weak layer, and that collapse propagates across the slope, we're going to create a very large, likely unsurvivable avalanches. You can also see wind slabs here. Those have been on the problem list for a few days. That big wind event that we talked about earlier built slabs in all locations, essentially, from top to bottom. They're more widespread at middle and upper elevations. But as those photos showed at the beginning, we saw some natural and human-triggered avalanches all the way down to the valley bottom. These we expect to be a bit more short-lived, but that wind event did rework the snowpack, and there are lingering hard slabs that are going to be sitting on touchy surfaces out in the mountains if you head out. The new snow that's falling today is going to make it a bit harder to identify those, and the light to moderate winds that are blowing are also building another set of smaller wind slabs than the ones that we built earlier, but again, they're kind of changing the picture a little bit. So as we're heading out into the mountains, we know we've got this persistent slab problem, this persistent weak layer buried underneath the snowpack that exists on almost all slopes. It's reactive on many slopes if you dig down to it. However, it's getting more difficult to trigger. As I said, tough situation to be in, but know that if we're entering avalanche terrain, it's almost certain that this weak snow is buried in the snowpack underneath our feet, and that triggering one of these slides remains a very deadly possibility. Hope you guys have a fantastic holiday. It's been a really quite a year so far. We've seen tons and tons of snow. It's great to see the mountains so white. Unfortunately, we've got some ugly snow buried in our snowpack, and forgetting about that or ignoring that is not a particularly safe way to go about traveling in the mountains right now. So I advise you to keep that snow in mind when you're choosing your terrain. Know that avalanches on that sort of snow can be triggered from long distances away, from valley bottom floors, from flat slopes below much steeper slopes, and those avalanches can run down to where you're hanging out at the bottom. So keep that in mind. Hope you enjoy the new snow that we've got this week. The pretty prodigious amounts of snow that we have on the ground. We're at close to 200% of average down here in our southern mountains, and well over 100% in our northern mountains. And remember that weak snow at the ground is probably going to be driving your travel decisions through the weekend and for the foreseeable future. As a little bit of a hint of what's to come, there's starting to be a more and more model agreement for a pretty significant storm starting sometime on late Monday and early Tuesday morning. It's still too far out to have high confidence in this, but the models are coming to close agreement that we're going to see some pretty big snowfall then. So hope that keeps you keeps you in touch with what's going on in the snowpack, helps you decide where you're going to be headed this weekend. Let us know what you're seeing out there. Your observations are always very useful. And check the forecast that Ethan's going to be writing for you in the morning tomorrow. Thanks so much and have a good one.